of your house to some entity.
Yes.
So that let them take care of the house. You'll pay the rent that like you were paying the mortgage at that point.
Technocracy.news.
You're watching Worldview 2, built on the 35 years of Worldview books, documentaries, research, high-profile interviews, and the radio and television broadcasts of Brannon House.
Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
On my way to try to find my first interview, this woman comes along and advises the people not to do an interview with me. Then she proceeds to take photos of me with her phone and then grabs a sign that says troll on it. She then, and I kid you not, followed me around the protest for the entire time I was there. The people she's guarding from an interview are folks calling for violence, holding a sign saying burn a Tesla, save democracy. And so obviously no one can be that dumb for free, so who is this woman? This is her protesting JP Morgan, funded by a campaign called 350 PDX's Defund and Divest Team. This is her on Capitol Hill blocking senators, so she travels for her job as a professional protester. And this is her participating in an If Not Now, a progressive Jewish organization supporting Ilhan Omar. Yet this is her on a website for a Lutheran church. Could it be that she's pretending to be Jewish? Yes, just like the people who occupied Trump Tower pretended to be Jewish. If you're wondering who the guy is signaling for help and talking very negatively about my channel in the background, he's another professional protester. Here's him freaking out at Grand Central Station, here's him calling to vaccinate the world, and here's him supporting I don't even know what. You know the worst part about this guy? He could be teaching your child. That's right. He's a professor of health sciences at Touro University in New York.
Oh, I have another sign. Let me see that.
Yes. I know he's a right-wing troll.
So don't do that.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Well, he cuts off the cover.
He's loving it. You're feeding it.
So this woman with an arrow was the one he signaled for help. And why? Because they're teammates. Here's her standing right in front of the college professor at a completely different protest. Here's her at another protest, and another. Trump and Elon have a vicious paid opposition in this country. Over 200 Tesla takedown protests have already happened. That's not natural. And it's not just words either, it's assault. These people are going after Tesla owners.
America's left is a fraud. It pays its protesters. We've known that for a long time. Welcome to Whistleblower Wednesday. The Rob Maness Show is live on Worldview Tube, our X Spaces simulcast, Rumble, YouTube, Truth Social Plus, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and Roku. And watch for us to be on the regular channel lineup on a lot of these, like Roku, here in the near future. They've been doing it for a long time, even in the days when some protests were, organic and attendees truly cared about the ideas they were advocating for. There was still an element of what is known as astroturfing. And there probably is in most of these types of political protests. But these days, they're all astroturf, or at least externally generated and paid for by the left's billionaires, and believe it or not, some of our tax dollars through non-government organizations, I believe. Well, fake protesters pushing fake messages harms our political discourse by distracting us from what matters most, and that is insisting on effective policy by our elected officials that protects us and our prosperity. So it's very dangerous. So my guest today, to pull the curtain back on the secrecy behind some of these shady groups maybe, and and in paying and organizing all this is Adam Swart. Adam's the founder and CEO of Crowds on Demand, the original paid protesting firm, and one of the nation's leading experts on protests, advocacy, and political influence. A lifelong liberal, he now finds himself increasingly, quote, not liberal enough, close quote, for the modern left, and has become a vocal critic of what he calls a party of tantrums, not ideas. Adam, welcome to the Rob Maness Show.
Colonel, thanks for having me on. I appreciate the invitation.
Oh, thank you so much for making the time, Adam. Look, the first question I have to ask really is how did you get into this, and why did you start this company?
Well, sure. I started the firm when I was in college, so this was 13 years ago. And it's been 13 years now. When I was in college, I worked for a lot of campaigns, primarily on the Democratic side of things. And I noticed that the people running the campaigns at the time were product of the 60s era, where they said, Adam, get me 10,000 students out to protest this. Get me 20,000 students to rally for that. And I said, guys, this is a little more difficult than it might have been in your day, right? So we would have so many challenges to organize that I got to thinking, this is a very valuable service. We rarely actually got together tens or 20,000 of people, but when we got even a dozen protesters here, 100 ralliers there, it completely changed the context of the event. And I would realize we're getting hundreds of thousands of dollars in earned media coverage for the campaign, and we're not really getting paid like we do. So I started thinking, what if there was a way to source people to actually participate in these political events and protests, and more broadly in marketing stunts all across the country? And we've sort of grown since then.
Well, your company's not a nonprofit, right? It's a for-profit company, right?
We are indeed.
So how do you make money, or do you make money?
Well, people pay us. Sure. Well, people pay us to organize demonstrations, right? Sometimes it's companies who are lobbying for something, or potentially just trying to spread the word, right? Like a product launch type of thing, PR stunt. Sometimes it's issue advocates, right? You want housing blocked in this area. You want a new power plant in that area. You're trying to stop the rezoning of your neighborhood. You want more police funding in your neighborhood, right? So all these kind of causes, people pay us to advocate for them. And what we do is we essentially take an issue and then take people who are passionate about that issue and compensate them, who are people who already are passionate about an issue, to actually demonstrate, make calls, etc., in support of that issue. So we're sort of the connection. So we actually help democracy by facilitating people's participation in the political process.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with that. I just have a problem with people that really, that's what they do. Like the opening clip, the guy, the young man was showing these protesters that were at all these different things that are different positions and different types of groups and everything. It's that piece of it that I think that muddles the water to the point where it can become dangerous. You turned down working on these Tesla protests. Why did you turn it down?
I think it's too risky right now, because I think that this was part of a broader market manipulation campaign by certain people this is actually not as much about politics as it is about market manipulation. Historically, there have been a lot of what's called short sellers of Tesla. These are people who actually make money when the stock goes down. Most of us make money when stocks go up, right? So the reality is that I believe the politics of it is actually a front for market manipulation, because what they're actually trying to do is encourage these boycotts, vandalism, menacing behavior against Tesla to actually tank the stock and therefore make money on the downswing. And of course, I don't want to talk about specifics in terms of people who have pitched us on the services, but I will note one thing in regards to the short selling is Bill Gates has been reported previously as a short seller of Tesla. So I'm just throwing out there that Bill Gates has shorted Tesla in the past, and he also has issues personally with Elon Musk. So I think you have to look for a profit motive in all of this.
Yeah, Adam, are you concerned about the violent aspect of these particular protests? I mean, I am. That's what got my attention on it initially, was not because the protests. I mean, it's kind of like ho hum these days. It's when you're on the right, like I am, and you're looking at it going, well, they're astroturfing it, they're paying them, whatever. It doesn't really mean anything. But the violent piece of it really has to be concerned, especially as somebody that's been fighting terrorism for about 40 years of my, or most of my adult life since I was 17.
Well, I think it's a big concern whenever there's violence, because it's critical to protect the right of First Amendment expression for peaceful protesters, regardless of their views, even if their views are heinous, right? But what happens, and I think this is a major concern and part of why I decided not to do the Tesla protests. It's not because I even disagree with some of the concerns with Elon Musk, but because what happens is you could organize a peaceful demonstration, and then you could have violent agitators who are either perhaps paid or perhaps just looters or people who are looking for an excuse for violence, who attach themselves to that group. And then it is very hard for you to say, hey, our group is actually trying to be peaceful, and to try to disassociate yourself with the people who are engaged in violence or vandalism. So it's a deep concern. And what I would tell anyone who's committing violence on Tesla or for any other protest cause is you're actually hurting the cause that you're seeking to raise awareness for.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there, and of course, I know you have some sensitivities as far as privacy goes, but are there companies out there that actually do pay people to be violent?
So I don't think it's on a company level. So let me work you through it. And as someone who has deep military knowledge, you will appreciate this. It's what I call the Russian doll model. So at the center is the person or people who are funding a cause, right? And at the end, right, so Russian dolls, they fold into each other. The last Russian doll is the guy committing the violence, throwing the Molotov cocktail, etc. If these guys are smart, they will create several layers between the funders and the guy who's throwing the Molotov cocktail. Whereas that is to say that the violent person doesn't know they're being paid by some billionaire, and the billionaire has never explicitly ordered the violence. So there's plausible deniability on either end, and you create enough layers to protect oneself, right? So yes, I don't think there's a company that's doing it because it wouldn't be good for business, but there are several layers, and there are companies involved indirectly that might be paying someone who's paying someone who's paying someone who's doing it.
Do they use, well, your company's a for-profit company, but do they use nonprofits like 501c4s or used in this process?
C4s, correct. So what you can have is, let's just say you have a foundation, you have a very wealthy person, that person might have a foundation. That foundation gives money to 501c4s. That 501c4 gives money to other 501c4s. That then gives money to an academic program, and then someone on the street is paying cash under the table to people who might be doing the violent act. Moreover, it's worth considering that there's a group out there called the National Lawyers Guild that has explicitly said, this is in regards to the Palestine protests. I don't know what their involvement is, if any, in Tesla, but they've specifically said, if you get arrested for the Palestine matter, we will protect you. We'll provide you legal representation, and try to get you out, right? So that's sort of also an implicit backing from a 501c4 group saying if you do get in trouble, not only maybe you might be compensated, but you also have that protection of knowing you can get an attorney to represent you, which, as we all know, is very expensive.
and very helpful. It is really prolific on the left side of the aisle from a political protest perspective.
National Lawyers Guild is so far to the left. They make the ACLU look like the Heritage Foundation.
That's a great comparison. I hadn't thought about it that way, but I'm sure you're absolutely right. Well, we got to take a commercial break. When we come back, I want to dive into this more. We will talk about the pro-Hamas protests and those kind of things, and we'll hear. I think we're going to hear from the Loomered area, Laura Loomer's outfit here when we come back in this short video after the commercial. We'll be right back with Adam Swart.
But with Brandon, it's always cutting edge stuff happening in the world, and it's not just from the political angle, because you can get that on other platforms, but it's always from the biblical angle. So you're dealing with a guy that loves Jesus, you're dealing with a guy that's very intelligent, you're dealing with a guy that is cutting edge conservatism, and you're dealing with a guy that wants to be biblical all at the same time. And so for that reason alone, I hope many, many people will not just lift up his ministry in prayer, but will also financially get behind it, because from the angle I'm trying to describe, he really is the only game in town. And we desperately need it in these last days. Can I get an amen to that?
Well, the media is going to act like there was some major anti-Trump protest in Washington, D.C. today. But the reality is, it's fake. They were all busting on buses, like right behind me. Stay tuned for Laura Loomer's exclusive footage that will show that a lot of the anti-Trump protesters in D.C. were literally busting. You know, it's really funny. We caught the left busing protesters into the Kamala Harris rally back in October. Then we caught the left busing protesters into Kamala Harris's Las Vegas rally, also last October. So I don't understand why the left thinks they can continue to bus people into Washington, D.C. and important events to astroturf a crowd, and don't think Laura and I are going to catch them. We caught you.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show here on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast. And my guest today is Adam Swart. He's the founder and CEO of a firm that hires protesters and pays them to go out and do this stuff. And Adam, one of the questions I have for you is your materials say you're a liberal, but that you're not liberal enough for the Democrat Party anymore. Are you an independent now, or and you don't have to say what you are if you don't want to, but I mean, this is a great conversation. I think people want to know more about you and how you do this and why you do it and what your aspirations are. So.
Sure, absolutely, Colonel. And I'm an independent. I don't feel like I owe fealty to either party. I think parties have to earn your vote. And I recommend everybody, whether right or left, to stop just giving blindly your vote to one party. That they've got to earn it each and every time, and each and every candidate has to earn your vote. I think both parties have been very complacent with how they've taken votes for granted, whether it's the Republicans in rural America or whether it's the Democrats in urban America. I don't think that should be taken for granted. You're right that I'm a lifelong liberal. I believe people shouldn't die on the street due to lack of health care. I believe we should have healthy food out there. That used to be a liberal message. I'm old enough to remember when the Republicans called Michelle Obama a Marxist for planting a vegetable garden, and now they're cheering RFK, right? So I'm happy if Republicans are cheering vegetables and electric cars. So people can change, and that's okay. And I'm a very independent voter, and I make up my own mind. In terms of crowds on demand, we also make up our own mind on the cases we undertake. I don't have to agree with the cause to take it on, as long as I feel like there's some merit to it and it deserves it. But my personal opinions, I'm pro public safety, pro police, pro military, pro environment, pro healthcare, pro public transit, pro clean air. It's pretty common sense positions to me.
Yeah, the election wouldn't have had the outcome it had the Baja community hadn't gotten on board with RFK. And look, I've been in the farming business since I've been out of the Air Force. Still have family doing it. I'm a big advocate of clean food and non-GMO food, and and getting our toxic chemicals out of our food supply and those kind of things. And I'm a pretty staunch conservative by some people's definition, but I'm really I'm really an Americanist, is what I call it, which is right where you are. A lot of what you just said, Adam, and that is that people should make their candidates earn their vote each and every time, no matter what's behind their name, the letter.
Yep, absolutely. It's interesting how some people just think they can run on the R and the D, take a ton of money, be extremely corrupt, and they just count on the people's votes every time when it comes to election time. So I don't believe in complacency at all. So that's why I'm a proud independent.
Yeah, that's what I'm really in favor of what Musk is doing with Doge. What I'm anticipating, though, is that the congressional politicians, the professional politicians, will put an end to that attempt to get at the corruption that's been found. But I think we've got a question over in the live audience. Rob, I saw a hand earlier. Do we have a question over there?
I don't see a hand right now, Colonel.
Okay. Well, I do. How do you hire these guys? What is if you could talk about it, do you use online products like Indeed to advertise for positions? How does that process work?
Sure. Well, I can't go in detail how some of our proprietary ways work, but we have a lot of people who write to us every single day. I would say I get about 200 emails. We get about 200 emails of people who want to work with us, and they tell us the issues they're passionate about, so we categorize it. But we also proactively reach out to people all the time. So let's just say, Colonel, we were to do an environmental protest in St. Louis, right? We would go reach out potentially to the local environmentalist groups there and offer to compensate them for attending something that they already agree with. Similarly, for pro-police demonstration, we might reach out to certain pro-law enforcement neighborhood watch type groups and offer to compensate them for turning out, because the thing is, Colonel, it is so hard to get people out, and there are a lot of times that I would say that Crowds on Demand is often the voice of the silent majority, because you have a small group who might come out and because they have some personal interest on the line in a matter, even if their view is only representative of how 10 or 20% of people think. Then the other group, you have 80% who disagree, but they're the ones who have jobs and kids and families. They can't afford to go out unless they're being compensated to. So we're actually the voice of providing those opportunities, because I don't think going to protest should be the sole purview of people who have giant trust funds or don't have families. I think it's important to give everyone the ability to attend and speak their mind.
Yeah, I mean, I've been on the activist side of doing things like opposing a policy and wanting to get it repealed and those kind of things. From a conservative perspective, it's hard to get people to be able to come out and protest because they all have jobs. I mean, we're all working. I'm even in military retirement, but I'm still working for a living. I can't just drop everything and go out to a protest. So it's kind of intriguing for me. Can you talk about at all how you pay? How do they get paid?
Well, they get paid based on how long they're out there and based on the cause. For example, I like to use this example. If I'm organizing a conservative event in downtown Seattle, that's going to be a little higher compensation, because finding conservatives in downtown Seattle might be hard, although it's a little bit easier these days because some of the left-wing policy has just been such a mess up there. Or finding liberals in central Mississippi, same deal. So part of the compensation is just depending on the issue that we're recruiting for, but most of it depends on the location, and the duration, and of course the number of people that we have involved.
So are you, are most, I should say it in general, are most of these companies $15 an hour wage kind of companies or higher?
More now, way more now. So it's interesting that was what we started with 13 years ago, and people were very happy with it. I mean, we basically started the company on the kind of end of the previous Great Recession, right? So $15 an hour was considered a great wage at that time. Now we definitely pay people considerably more than that, because think about how expensive the cost of living has gotten recently. We want to make it worth our while. Plus, Colonel, we need good people out there. I always tell my clients, it doesn't help me or help you for me to source homeless people on the street for you. It helps you to have people who sincerely believe in your cause and who are great activists and advocates who can evangelize your cause and who are able to very succinctly articulate the message when the media comes along and wants to talk to people.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, we do have some hands up over in the audience now that I can see. Let's go ahead and take a question from over there. Go ahead, Rob.
We have Miss G, Colonel.
Good afternoon, Colonel, and good afternoon to your guests. Adam, I have a question. I live in New York City. I have constant protests going on here. I was wondering if you have worked at what's going on here. And one other question. Do you have a lot of interest from conservative groups?
Correct. So let me answer the second part first, which is yes, we work with both conservatives and liberals. And as the Colonel and I were just talking about, a lot of times conservatives actually need us more because conservative people are more likely to have jobs and family obligations that prevent them from going out to go to protests that they believe in. So we have a lot of interest from conservatives. And again, that's not a bad thing because we're turning out passionate conservative activists when we do that. In regards to your first question, yes, I mean, what's going on across the country, I mean, not just New York, but everywhere. If you're talking about the hands-off movement, frankly, I think the hands-off, I have to give it to them. It's a good slogan because it's almost a libertarian slogan, right? Hands-off, it's basically implies that the government we don't want the government to mess with us in some way or another. So keeping the message on the economy, on Social Security is very smart, but unfortunately, the Democrats are often their worst enemy. So I suspect the message is going to end up getting lost and focused on trans issues, Palestine, and other matters that are less popular.
Yeah, I saw one of your quotes about that issue, Adam, and what came to my mind was that's great if they can stick to that, exactly what you just said, and keep it on the economy. But what's the counter messaging that's happening is that they're out there supporting fraud, waste, and abuse, because the messaging from the Musk side and the Trump administration is that, look, we're here to clean up the fraud, waste, and abuse. No beneficiary is going to get a benefit cut. And as a matter of fact, we think we'll be able to increase beneficiaries so that more people are able to take advantage of these programs, and maybe even make the programs like Social Security solve it by cutting this fraud, waste, and abuse. So they've got a tightrope they've got to walk in that regard, don't they?
Well, the proof is really in the pudding, and when it comes to all of this stuff, the question is, if people are seeing their 401ks down, if people are seeing the price of goods rise because of the tariffs, if people feel that there's interruption in their government jobs. I mean, there are a lot of conservatives who work for the government who've been laid off by Doge, right? I think that's going to be a major liability to the president and certainly to Elon Musk. So I think the messaging is actually pretty good. I think cutting fraud, waste, and abuse sounds good, but if your neighbor who you know is a good government employee is getting cut, that's not gonna look so good, right? So I think that I think actually the messaging is is quite on point with hands off. But I think that they're going to end up losing sight of it, and because as always, they're their worst enemy.
Yeah, I saw a clip as I was doing my research from just this morning of a live shot over the weekend in I think it was New York City, and they were protesting at the foot of high-rise apartment buildings, and there were people throwing trash down on the protesters because folks are just, they get fed up about this stuff when they live where this is happening all the time, like a place like New York City. How do you do you have a program as part of your process that tries to address that issue?
Sure. Well, the answer is I always tell my people, this is again why we pay people well and we want them to be articulate. If people are screaming, hurling curse words, and waking you up at 3 a.m., it doesn't matter what you're saying. The message is going to be lost, right? Even if you agree with it, the message is going to be lost. So I always tell people to be so polite that it's going to upset people how polite they are, right? Because that works. You kill them a lot more with honey than with vinegar. So I always tell people to be polite, engage people respectfully, tell your story, and we're in the business of trying to convince people. So part of why I sometimes stay away from certain issues is because I feel like there's no opportunity to convince people. With Israel Palestine, we stayed away because it felt like there's a lot of yelling on both sides, but no one was being persuaded. If I can't persuade someone, then the client is ultimately wasting their money with me. So I like to be able to persuade people.
Yeah, I noticed the hands-off protest this weekend, and you probably saw it in that little clip I played, and I'll just say it before we go to the break, that all these Palestine flags came off, and Muslim citizens, those kind of things were out there with that. And I think you're right about the concern about that message getting lost and overcome by this other stuff. The visuals do a lot of that, even though they may not be talking about it. The visuals of the signs and the flags do a lot of that. Well, we got to take another commercial break. When we come back, we've got more hands in the audience, and we'll continue this fascinating discussion and session about how this all works. And one of the questions I want to ask Adam is, should conservatives really be using this kind of approach? Because we criticize it as AstroTurf all the time. I want to get his opinion on what AstroTurf really is and why we should be opposed to it. We'll be right back with the Rob Maness Show, and Adam Swart as my guest.
So walk us up the ladder on how we get from these Tesla Trump protests all the way up to USAID. How did that happen?
Yeah, so in this one instance, a lot of this new resistance lab training being done in concert between Democrat members of Congress and the Harvard Kennedy School. If you look at who their now erased donor page used to list, it was USAID and the State Department. But if you sort of broaden this critique out, USAID, I think, being a representative, if not having directly collaborated with a lot of left-wing dark money groups like George Soros's Open Society Foundations, the Tides Foundation, Rockefeller Philanthropies. I could probably fill a whole show just rattling off their names. These are the very same groups that are funding Indivisible movement, funding all of these sort of left-wing, shady, swampy NGOs that in some cases are reimbursing protesters up to $200 to show up at these town hall events to, rain terror on the streets across the United States of America.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show, and we're live on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast. And my guest today is Adam Swart. He's the CEO and founder of Crowds on Demand, which hires protesters to put in the field. And Adam, as you said in the last segment, you don't just work leftist and liberal protest. You basically take a look at the issue and the requirement and make a business decision on whether to approach it or not. But there's some ethics built in there, too, from a personal perspective, and I'm sure from a professional perspective, right?
That's correct. That's correct. It's funny you should say I'm a senior because it's my 34th birthday today. So not quite a senior yet, but but the thing is that as we have gotten older, it's I've been more selective about the types of clients that we'll take on. We've never taken on hate groups, for example, and never taken on business from hostile foreign countries, even though we get approached by them all the time by actors from hostile foreign countries. That we've never done. But within issues, I like to, as I was saying before the break, make sure that it's a type of issue where we can convince people, where we're not just trying to add to the noise. We're trying to actually convince people who may have a different perspective or people who might not know much about an issue. And that absolutely includes conservative causes. And we've made huge impact for a lot of conservative causes by creating advocacy groups and turning out peaceful demonstrators. And it's so important that conservatives go out there and demonstrate peacefully as well.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit earlier in the show, but I wanted to come back to it because you're exactly right. And what I've seen in my experience, and I've been in the political arena for since 2013, being in the military for 3 decades plus before that. But what I've seen is, for the most part, the folks that are center right are nonviolent, non-intimidation. Not the yelling and screaming for the most part. And this January 6th thing, while, yeah, there were some pockets of violence, and we still don't know exactly what the root causes were of that, and they were mostly conservative people, we think, that's an aberration on the side that I usually find myself supporting when it comes to like a demonstration or a protest. But the other side leans towards what they call direct action a lot. And that's a term used by Democratic Socialists of America, Antifa, and other left groups that aren't associated with those two organizations. So what's the difference there? You've got experience on both sides of this aisle in these two camps. Why does that side choose to do intimidation, violence, and those kind of things? It doesn't seem like it's successful. It doesn't win me over.
Correct. And just as an example, I agree with your analysis that if you exclude January 6th and certain other right-wing kind of militia type events, for the most part, the conservative demonstrations, even far-right demonstrations, tend to be pretty peaceful. And the test that I use is if you're a liberal journalist and you go to a right-wing rally, even if, let's just say, you take the Proud Boys, a fairly far-right group, and you ask questions, I think you would be safe within those groups. They might say immature things, but ultimately they're unlikely to beat you up. Whereas people in the BLM riots in the summer of 2020, conservative journalists were beaten to death at those rallies. And similar things have happened during the Palestine event. So I think you have to ask a therapist in terms of why the left feels justified for violence, because the best justification that I have is it is actually a psychological justification, is the left believes so strongly in the clarity of its purpose that really there are leftists that anything in furtherance of that purpose is justifiable. They truly feel that conservatives are evil, whereas I think conservatives generally feel that liberals are stupid. And I think that's the difference.
Yeah, well, I try not to make decisions based on my emotions, and I see the liberals more emotional than the folks that I deal with. Right, that's one of the ways that I deal with it and try to figure it out. Well, we've got another question over the audience. Let's go ahead and take that. Go ahead, Rob.
All right, Colonel, we have Wib.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Colonel, and happy birthday, Adam. My question is, what is the employment status, or what kind of employees are these crowds? Are they independent contractors? And the reason why I'm asking is, in the hands-off protests, there's rumors or stories going around that they were specifically told not to hire minorities. How can they get away with that?
Well, I can't speak to that specific claim. I think it's deeply disturbing when people make those sorts of things, because again, if that's true, if then the left, the tolerant left, is saying don't hire minorities, that is deeply disturbing. But I think that it may or may not, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not giving legal advice, but it may or may not be justifiable under the idea of kind of like, if you think of it as a performance. For example, if I'm creating a movie, right, and if I'm doing a movie about Martin Luther King, you wouldn't necessarily want a white person playing Martin Luther King, right? So I think you could potentially use the same justification in that regard of, hey, we're trying to get a certain type of people essentially for our performance. So I can't comment on the veracity of, like, on whether that's true or not about the hands-off saying no minorities. I full-heartedly condemn it if that is the case. But I think that if that's the case, the bigger issue isn't the legal issue. It's why the liberals don't want minorities out there. And, you know, it just goes to show the liberals have really taken minority votes for granted for so long, and have talked down to minorities who mostly have the same concerns as anyone else. They want safe streets, they want clean air, they want jobs, they want good schools, and a lot of them have been pretty unhappy with how the Democrats have run our major cities.
Yeah, it's a great question. Thanks for answering that. Are your employees, when you hire them, are they 1099 or are they regular employees where you have to like pay workers' comp and all that? I'm a small businessman now too, so I have to ask these kind of questions.
Sure. So it's a mix, and I don't want to go deep into how we structure things, but typically people do engage on a contractual basis, because it helps them and helps us, because they are free to engage on whatever causes that they want and free to not engage on causes that they don't support. The contractor relationship works well. If they're an employee, that would imply that they have to go, which if you're a plumber, it doesn't matter, Democrats clog toilet or Republicans clog toilet, you go, unclog that toilet. In this case, we need a little more discretion on both sides. So the contractor relationship is better in that regard.
I had to ask that. I don't want to go too far into those weeds either. But so my opening clip this segment was about USAID, and it's coming from the NGO aspect of this, Adam. And you mentioned in the last segment about having foreign entities approach you and you turn them down and everything. I wanted to ask you, how would you identify that? Is it obvious that it's a foreign entity? I mean, Loomer has reported that some of these buses over the weekend were from a Chinese company, and most of us that study the Chinese government, the PRC's government, know that the Communist Party or the People's Liberation Army have a hand, if not controlling interest, in every company that is a Chinese-based company. There are no such things as a free company like yours or mine, my little LLC there in China. So are there markers that you look for? And then this follow-up to that, I'll just ask it straight out. Do you take any action, like let the authorities know? Or is there an obligation to do that? Any of those kind of things?
Sure. So let me just address the bus thing. First of all, I do generally object when people try to delegitimize the protest by saying here's buses. I mean, buses are a good way to transport a lot of people who can't all necessarily park in the same way. So people on both the left and the right will try to delegitimize the protest by saying, hey, here's a bus that busts the protesters in. So I kind of disagree with that general premise, but I agree with you completely on the PRC. Any Chinese company should be considered an arm of the Chinese government, which is why we can't work with those companies unless it's for a purely marketing or corporate kind of stunt. How we identify these who is contacting us a lot, it's typically you get it through the intentions, right? You have a business person from this country who says, oh, I'm just a concerned citizen. I'm very interested in doing this demonstration. But when you get into the weeds with the demonstration, you can tell that the objective of the demonstration is either to embolden that authoritarian regime or worse, to make things in America look bad. And they will never say they're part of that country. And I may not ever be able to prove it, but these business people in most authoritarian regimes are essentially an arm of that regime. If there's a wealthy Chinese billionaire, you should consider that person an arm of the PRC government, whether that person wants to be or not, they are. If the PRC government asks a Chinese billionaire to contact me, that Chinese billionaire will contact me.
Yeah, absolutely right. Well, we got to take our last break, Adam. When we come back, I want to get your take on this group called Indivisible. We hear a lot about it in the media these days associated with the protests. And go back to the subject of astroturfing, because I think there's a difference based on what I've heard you talk about in your hiring for protests that you would support or believe in or be comfortable with, as opposed to putting a fake crowd out there. And I think that may be the difference. I want to give you a chance to talk about that. We'll be right back with Adam Swart here on the Rob Maness Show.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Is the government tracking you? Do they have access to all your data? Well, if you go to worldviewtalk.com, you'll find out about a cell phone company that, well, does not store your data. They don't do that. This is what they're known for. They don't store your data. You have privacy. You're not being tracked. That's why a lot of folks are turning to worldviewtalk.com. You'll find their prices are very competitive. All the details are there at worldviewtalk.com. Again, worldviewtalk.com. Oh, while you're there, not only do they have cell phones that aren't tracking you, you can find out about how to get a satellite phone. Should the whole system go down and you want to communicate with a family member or a loved one, you might want to have a satellite phone. Or how about their solar generators? They have great solar generators. Check them all out right now. Worldviewtalk.com, worldviewtalk.com.
That is the fact. And Indivisible, which has really been the backbone and spearheading so much of these protests and demonstrations, well, they're actually paying not just these protesters to participate in these town halls, to go after their members of Congress. They specifically have a, quote, Musk or Us program where they're paying protesters up to $200 to participate in events like these. But I have new reporting coming out today highlighting how they are now subsidizing up to $1,500 per Indivisible group to host events that they describe as, quote, appreciation celebrations for members, quote, advocacy, recruitment, and get out the vote work. They also are subsidizing group retreats, whether that's for things like cookouts and barbecues and pizza parties, or what they call solidarity building events like DEI training. You can even see the picture you have up on screen. People can choose if they want to be reimbursed via check, direct deposit, or their distributed fundraising account, right? And I just think that stories like these, it's really important to drill down, because if you look at it broadly, right, how the left-wing media presents it, they never drill down on how these protesters, these individuals, are being funded by Soros-funded entities, by these left-wing dark money networks. The people that you're seeing, it's not like they are organically or altruistically deciding to protest something. They are being paid to do so. And in the same vein, right now, AOC and
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show, and we're talking about paid protesters with a CEO and a founder of a company that does paid protesting. Adam Ford is my guest today, and this has been a fascinating conversation. And Ms. Winters there on Real America's Voice, Adam, was getting at the something that's concerned me is these town halls where Republican congressmen and women are going to their town halls in their home districts. And angry people are showing up. And as you peel the layers back, you start finding out that these folks have been paid to be there. They're not necessarily often from even the district where they've managed to get into the town hall. And those kind of things are even eligible to vote for the individual that their town hall they're at. And that, in my mind, that's astroturfing, if that's what's happening. I'm not saying all of them are, but that's what the investigative reporting has revealed in a lot of these cases. But astroturfing, though, is different than what I hear you talking about your company does. Can you walk us through the difference, or do I have that wrong?
Well, I think there's kind of this false dichotomy that people sort of see. There's one side as this kind of pure grassroots, everyone's 100% engaged, and this other side is, oh, there's this evil, dark astroturfers. To me, if someone is not breaking the law and they're expressing their point of view respectfully, or even not respectfully, as long as they're not breaking the law, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. And the people who are out there, what Indivisible is talking about, and they're paying for people's retreats and they're paying people to attend events, I don't think that's wrong. I think it's unlikely that someone who doesn't agree with them is going to take their money to and go out and protest Trump. So for example, I doubt most of your listeners would go out to an Indivisible event just because they were paid a couple $100 to do it. So I don't think that distracts. I think there are other issues that I take issue with in their messaging. So I think that the reality is every movement is funded, right? Everything from organizations that conservatives like the Tea Party. The Tea Party was funded by the Koch brothers, right, in 2010. Doesn't mean that there aren't a ton of people who really agreed with that message and took issue with President Obama's policies, but they were out there and they were being funded. BLM was funded, Indivisible is funded, MAGA is funded. This is the United States of America. We're a capitalist country, so there's going to be some amount of money in things. And so I really don't see any problem with it. But what we try to do is make sure that everyone who goes to a Crowds on Demand event believes in that cause. And we work really hard to do it, even though it actually leads us to have to charge higher prices to our customers by nature of having to vet the people that we source.
Yeah, I don't totally disagree with you. Where I have a problem is sending people that are paid into a congresswoman or man's town hall event in their home district that really wouldn't be there otherwise, to paint a picture that the media is invariably going to pick up on, even if it was the right doing that on the left. For some reason, I would disagree with that, because the media is vested. Right. Say again.
So that both sides have done it, and it's not a bad thing. And my advice to conservatives is you should be doing what Indivisible is doing more. And we work with a lot of conservatives who want to do that, who say, hey, look at what Indivisible is doing. Look at what these guys are doing on the left to organize to that degree. Conservatives shouldn't immediately dismiss the idea, that some amount of compensation is bad, because actually this is what makes the society go around. I mean, Tucker Carlson is paid to go on his program and speak his mind. Why shouldn't you, as a conservative, be paid to speak your mind?
Elon Musk is giving away $1 million at a time.
Sure.
And I don't have a problem with that either. Yeah, it's an interesting discussion, because I don't think a lot of folks on my side of the aisle have thought through that. But we've got some more questions over here in the audience. Let's take those since we're in the last segment here. Go ahead, Rob.
All right, we got Miss G again.
Hey, Adam, I was wondering, have you worked with, or have any of the following two groups reached out to you? Within Our Lifetime and decolonize this place?
Sure, I'm aware. What we can't really comment, unfortunately. Thank you so much for your question, by the way. But I can't comment on folks who do or don't reach out to us because we have client confidentiality with everybody who reaches out. Because I wouldn't be very good at my job if I didn't keep people's information private. And by the way, the reason why I keep information private isn't because of anything shady. Think about cancel culture over the past several years. There have been so many people on the conservative side who say, hey, I want to fund this movement. I want to fund this cause, but I'm a CEO of a major company. I'm on the board of directors of a major company. If they knew I was funding these causes, then I would be fired and I would be canceled. So I have to do it discreetly. And I suspect now there are people on the left who have and I know there are people on the left who feel the same now that there's sort of a little bit of a conservative cancel culture from the Trump administration. And personally, I think discretion is the better art of valor. And the better art of valor is discretion. Sorry, I botched that quote. And it's important to keep people's information private to be able to participate anonymously in the political discourse.
Yeah, it's interesting because if a political campaign or a PAC hires you, they have to report it in some way or another. But I absolutely see your point. From a businessman's perspective, sometimes we have to enter confidentiality agreements so that kind of thing doesn't happen, because I'm opposed to it on all sides. Cancel culture is the abomination of the 21st century, man. I tell you. We got one more question from the audience. I'll go ahead and take that before I let you go. Go ahead, Rob.
All right, Colonel, we have Key.
So I have a question that always is on my mind. Why do some of these protesters wear face masks, and is it a requirement to be able to get paid so that you don't show your face? Because I've always wondered why there are so many protesters out there wearing the face masks that we wore during COVID. Is it to like conceal their identity so that they can, and is it for them to be able to get paid for that?
Well, that's a very good question. For us, we've never required face masks at any of our protests except for a brief period in COVID when that was mandatory by certain local authorities. I suspect that I respect it. As long as it's not to hide that you're doing something illegal, you should be able to go protest and cover your face and say, again, just like the rich person can contribute to something anonymously, the normal person should be able to have a face mask and not risk cancel culture, either on the left or on the right. And I think that's important. I think where people should be more nervous about, kind of a last thought to leave you with, Colonel, is that there are people who could be backing groups that you have no idea of. Right. I mean, for all you know, George Soros could be behind Donald Trump. I mean, I'm not even kidding you. Like, there could be people, it could be as crazy as that, because I was working you through the Russian doll model. You could easily have someone backing someone else who seems diametrically opposed, but they have their own reasons, and the person doesn't even know that they're getting support from someone that they disagree with, if you see what I'm saying. So it's a crazy world out there. I think anonymous political participation is great, but just be vigilant about what you see and look at the ideas and judge people at face value. Don't always try to dissect people's motives.
Oh, absolutely right. That's why I brought up the USAID model on top to layer over the Russian doll model, because the USAID model uses NGOs on both sides of the aisle, explicitly to Republican and Democrat NGOs, funneling hundreds of millions of dollars, your tax dollars, into them to do propaganda and messaging that you may or may not agree with, folks. So it's very important. I want you to leave us with this, though. You study this, Adam. You're very experienced with it, even though, and I'm not going to make fun of your youth, even though I'm 63. But you know a lot about this, more than the average American does, more than I did before I started this conversation. What would be your advice going into 2026, the midterms, for the GOP in our congressional election?
My advice for Republicans is don't immediately dismiss your constituent concerns as liberal tantrums. Listen to the other side, listen to concerns. There are legitimate concerns from the left about whether it's Doge cutting too quickly, whether it's the tariffs costing us money in our 401ks, whether it's clean air protections being rewinded, whether it's the American charity abroad being unraveled through USAID. There are legitimate concerns, and don't just dismiss them. Engage them how you would want to be engaged yourself.
Absolutely. Well, if somebody wants to hire you, how do they get a hold of you guys? And then I'll let you go.
www.crowdsondemand.com. Fill out request a quote, and we will get back to you quickly regarding your inquiry, and hopefully we can help you or guide you in the right direction.
Well, thank you so much, Adam. Adam Swartz, CEO of Crowds on Demand. It's there. It's a reality. I think we should take a hard look at how we use it on our side of the aisle. And I'm speaking from a center-right Americanist perspective, because you got to use every tool that's available to you that's legal and ethical. Tomorrow's Truth Thursday. CEO of Pickaxe, the new social media platform. I recommend everybody go check it out. My show gets up there from Rumble every day that we publish it. And Jeff Dornick is that CEO, and he'll be with me tomorrow on Truth Thursday. We'll see you then.
You are watching Worldview 2, built on the 35 years of world. You are watching Worldview 2, built on the 35 years of Worldview books, documentaries, research, high-profile interviews, and the radio and television broadcasts of Brannon House.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Troy Smith, and welcome back to Slingshot TV. We had breaking news yesterday that was sure to catch the attention of many of you out there, and that is that the Democrats have announced plans to take back the House in 2026. The list procured by Hakeem Jeffries includes 10 seats that Trump won by over 10 percentage points or more in 2024. With House Democratic leaders projecting the environment will be favorable enough to catapult them even in heavily Republican districts. Some will likely be massive lifts for the Democrats, and part of their expansive list may be for show. But Democrats are zeroing in on members like Representative Andy Ogles of Tennessee, Andy Barr of Kentucky, Monica De La Cruz of South Texas, just for a few examples. All three hold districts that Trump carried by between 15 and 18 points last year. This list includes the seats of some obviously endangered Republicans, such as Representatives Mike Lawler, Brian Fitzpatrick, and Don Bacon, who has been recently attacking Trump. We're going to talk about that today. It also names several members who hold seats that are competitive every 2 years, such as David Vallado and Young Kim and Gabe Evans, Tom Keene Jr., Ryan McKenzie. Point is, folks, that even districts in Florida, like those held by Corey Mills and Anna Paulina Luna, they're being targeted by the Democrats. And there's no better person to break down this assault and what we need to do to prepare as Americans for this Democrat assault than the legendary Roger Stone. He's possibly, I believe, the most successful political operative in the history of the United States of America. No man has seen more men to the White House than our guest